Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together.
Welcome back, you guys, to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Clay Bowers. I'm here with Luke Oswald, and we have our other guest, Luke McLaughlin. Luke is a former participant in Naked and Afraid, a very skilled primitive skills guy. But I don't want to explain everything about you. You tell us about you.
Hey y'all. Thanks for having me. How to explain myself. I guess sometimes I call myself a human coach. I have a school down in North Carolina called Holistic Survival School, and I teach people what it means to be human. And so that can range from anything from learning how to make tools of our ancestors, from sticks and stones and baskets and tanning animal hides, all the way down to like emotional competency and how we work together as a community. So I'm a rewilder and a teacher. So of the many other things I've done.
That's pretty deep, Luke. So let's break that down a little bit more of the emotional. You said emotional competency or social competency?
Both. Both. Yeah, basically we are, evolutionarily. I studied biology, so I'll say, my friends make fun of me and say, if Luke was a doll and had a pull tab on it, and my catchphrase would be evolutionarily, because I'm always talking about us as a species, us as humans. And so, evolutionarily, humans are very social, and that's our superpower, and that's our strong point, and potentially our weakness too. And so, we got to figure out how to work together, because that's what we're meant to do. Just like ants in a colony, if you take one human and put them out of the colony, life's not going to be so easy. That ant's going to fail. So I think that's one of our greatest superpowers that gets brushed under, especially in the survival world. I teach survival skills, and we really focus as a society on individualism, rugged individualism, especially in survival series and situations. So teaching people how to just share what you're feeling and have emotional experiences and work together and communicate your feelings. That's, a really important skill that I have personally seen. Clay, you mentioned Naked and Afraid. I watched fellow participants in Naked and Afraid. It's not the skills that get in the way. It's your own shit. It's your own baggage if you haven't worked on that. And so I'm kind of a jack of all trades, perhaps, in some way, that I deal with that emotional realm a lot, so that we can kind of get that out of the way, so we can really have a really fun time when we learn how to tan a deer hide or make an arrowhead or something like that.
I actually remember reading about Australian Aborigines, and this was specifically about the Aborigines, but I know that this applies to other cultures as well, that they would oftentimes have very erratic outbursts of anger or sadness or whatever, but then they kind of work it out of their system and then just be okay, I'm all better now,
Totally.
Totally. So I do think that is in stark contrast with today, with somebody is angry, they either let it out in an outburst and everybody around them doesn't know how to deal with it, or they let it out in an outburst and then they just keep going and they keep holding on to that anger. And both of those are weird, because you should be able to be around somebody who's angry and just go, okay, this person's angry, let's just let that happen and not cause a scene about it.
Totally. Yeah. I teach them a lot about how, if you watch an animal being hunted, a deer or an impala or anything, there's after that animal gets to a safe spot, it shakes, right? It just lets out whatever it was storing and holds. And so we're no different than those animals. We can just move through emotions pretty quickly, but a big part of that is being witnessed in our emotions by ourselves, just accepting where we're at, and also, and that's when other people can see that Luke's sad right now. It helps us kind of move through it quickly.
No, I
think we talk about that on this podcast. Did you? Bam, emotions.
The biggest problem is tolerance. I believe in this day and age, in this culture, is intolerance of other people, and the closed-mindedness to not be willing to try and work through or understand someone's anger. I think that's the biggest thing or threat we're facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that's another thing I teach at my school, is what we call this system called nonviolent communication. And it's really based on, the essence of violence is not accepting or, like you don't have to agree with the person, but just not like, saying like you can be that emotion. That's, like if we're like denying their feeling, that's somehow violent. And so nonviolent communication is just like, yeah, we all have basic human needs. And they're all the same. And it's like, if you can learn those needs of just like, oh, I have a need to be seen. I have a need to be witnessed. I have a need to have shared reality with people. I have a need for movement. I have a need for freedom. Then when anyone says anything to me, I can find that root underlying need, even if I don't agree with them, what they're saying. I'm like, oh yeah, it sounds like you really feel strongly about that, and that helps you feel whatever, and they're like, yeah, you can get to the root of it. It's like, I don't agree with you, but I can see you and help you understand what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, because I've done that too, because we all have the same basic human needs. So
yeah, that's awesome. So when you said people on the show fell apart because of their emotions or lack thereof, do you have any specific examples?
Oh man. Yeah, there was one in particular. It was a woman when I won't name her, but I just witnessed, like, we were in a group. This was when I did Excel. So for context, there are 12 humans surviving in the jungles ish, savannah ish of of Colombia in South America. And we were surviving for 40 days. And so we're in day like 20, 30, you're getting hungry, you're getting skinny, you're getting down to your hunter-gatherer weight, and your brain is just, it's not functioning at max capacity, we'll say. So take all of this with a grain of salt. But this woman, I remember just like everything we said, she took as like an attack, like we would just be like, oh, maybe you could hunt over here as a suggestion, or maybe, you could feed the fire more, or maybe, and she just took it like, oh, you're attacking me, and oh, it means this. And she was like super insecure about her skills and where she was at in life. And so everything, it was this lens through which everything we said and everything that happened was like, felt like an attack, felt like a threat. And so, it really was like she was doing fine physically and we were doing fine as a team, but, or at least that was my perception. And she just was like, I can't do this. And just was like, I'm out of here on day, like, 30 something. And so that was just such a bummer to see, like, we're not trying to attack you. We're like really trying to like be as gentle as we can, but because of her own, stuff, it just felt like really, really hard for her to stick around. So she had to quit. And so that, among other things, is just like watching. So what I try to teach is like, how do we see our unconscious survival patterns, right? It's so funny because it's like survival as in like, how did we survive childhood? How did I'm getting into psychology here, but like as a kid, how did we get love and acceptance? And there's all these unconscious survival patterns that we've learned. So when we get in an actual like physical survival situation, they come out really strongly. And I just love the overlap of like, yeah, that's part of my school. Holistic survival school is like, people think it's like a mountain lion attack that's going to kill us in the woods. But really it's like, what's the thing that's actually killing us? It's our unconscious survival patterns that we use regularly without even knowing. And so that like we limit ourselves and we keep ourselves in this small kind of way. But it's actually the things that are killing us in our modern day are more like lack of community, lack of meaning, stress, lack of healthy foods. Like those are the things that are actually killing us. So if I'm truly a survival instructor, I'm going to help you find those unconscious patterns, help you live a more healthy lifestyle. And the number one thing about humans being healthy, in my opinion, is community. If you don't have like-minded community and you're not, doing basic human things like feeling emotions and watching other people's emotions, you're going to be miserable. Like you're not going to survive in a very good way. So
you just hit the nail on the head, though. I mean, modern day, like society as a whole right now, there is no true community hardly at all anymore. And, you see people and some people, oh yeah, I've got 20 so-and-so friends or whatever. Those are not, like, if you have that many friends, those aren't real friends. Small groups, tribes, all those things. You can hang out with those people, but you really don't have as much in common as like those 4 core people that are your ride or die, that you call them up and would hunt with you or do whatever. Those are the things, the bonds that so many people are lacking these days. And it's sad. It really is that we've gotten so far, so disconnected, so busy with these careers and modern culture and all this other BS that I mean, we're all on antidepressants and all this other stuff that just we don't need to be on. The outdoors, primitive survival skills, those things that we could tap into would heal so many people, but they don't even want to try and learn it because it's too weird, it's bizarre, it's out there, it's too disconnected from what they think they need to cling on to.
You got to come visit down in Asheville, North Carolina. Some people are living in different ways.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, a lot of land leases and land mates and all kinds of stuff out there. Yeah. Especially the Asheville area, but
we're actually full in Asheville. I shouldn't tell people to come down
here. I'll visit. I'm not staying. I got my own plans.
I tell people all the time because same thing is kind of happening in Traverse City where I live. So I say we should start a campaign of saying there's heroin needles all over the sidewalks, and
no. That might bring people too, Clay. Just the wrong element that you want to attract.
Yeah. But I had a question for you. So have you ever had somebody come to your classes that maybe needed this sort of thing in their life and then was actually like really hesitant or fought back against it, or kind of like left in like this sucks, I'm out of here.
Like a quit sort of way?
Yeah. Like just come to your class.
Yeah, not so much my like individual classes. So I teach, individual workshops, like a bow building workshop and eye tanning and, small things like that. So in 4 days, I don't think anyone's ever quit any of my 4-day classes, but I run a 10-month program that is one 4-day weekend per month for 10 months. So 40 days. And we go really deep. We go really deep in skills. We go really deep in community. And I've had people quit for sure there, where we hit on some hard parts and it feels uncomfortable and feels like too much. And it makes sense. Like our whole survival patterns are designed to not be seen, right? They're designed to keep us alive. And if we haven't investigated them before, if we haven't started witnessing ourselves and watching ourselves, then it can feel really, really scary to dive into them too much. And so sometimes people are like, nope, I'm like, too much for me. I thought we were just gonna be playing with sticks and stones, and all of a sudden we're talking about emotions too. Like, it's too much, I'm like, cool, like I get it, like no judgment, like I don't want to traumatize those people. So if it feels like too much, let them take a break.
I see. I've seen that, not in that particular space, but I spent a good chunk of time in the past, in like ayahuasca ceremonies space. And I did a lot of that, and I saw many people come in not really knowing what was going to happen, and then just basically being like, "Whoa, this is crazy," and like kind of like getting out of it, and then not really getting any healing. It was kind of weird, like where the first time that I ever did it, I remember just thinking like, "Oh my God, like my life has changed."
I think the biggest problem with that, like you're talking about though, Clay, is people can't let go of control or realize that there's something else higher than them. They want to put themselves first instead of others. And that's hard to do, to be able to kill the ego, to be reborn and have that open mind and that open lens where the world, you could see it in a different light, and people don't want that. Yeah. And that's the hardest part to break away. You have to pull the veil off in order to see everything. And people, they're so connected to this world that they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the definitions of trauma is too much, too fast. And so it's really about like the right pacing, right? You could do anything. You take someone hunting and like, we're gonna, kill an animal, and all of a sudden, whoa, like big eyes, it could be a lot of different things. It's just how much familiarity do you have with the subject matter? How, and how fast are we doing it? We have to find the right pacing for every student. So it all just depends on, how familiar they are and how fast we're going here.
Yeah. Like if I was an adult onset hunter. I didn't grow up hunting, but I imagine that had I gotten right into hunting and then just like killed a deer and somebody was like, "Got this deer," I'd be like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, totally.
I
Kind of what my
hate
dad
that
did
word.
with me as a kid. Like, all right, now reach in there and grab its colon. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
I hate that
Thanks,
word
Dad.
though. Adult
What?
onset. It just sounds like something icky, like, onset diabetes, something that's caused,
Right,
you know what I mean? Like there's got to be a
Yeah.
better, we need to recoin that. I just feel like it's such an icky connotation to it. Oh, I'm an
What
adult
about
Yeah.
onset hunter.
you could do a late blooming hunter? How about that?
Oh, late
Right,
blooming.
right.
Yeah, that was me. So Luke, did you? I know that you had to do like a little bit of killing, and I know that I've been seeing your evolution for years on Instagram, and plus, we have met in real life before. What does hunting look like for you these days? And I know a little bit of this, but I just want to ask you so you can
Yeah.
explain to others.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was a big sports guy. My dad was a big hunter, and so in high school I didn't do a lot of hunting. I did a little bit, I watched my dad kind of on the peripheries. He'd shoot a deer, we'd go track it, like kind of on the sideline. But yeah, I picked up my compound bow again when I was probably, I don't know, 24 or something like that, and like shot, like didn't really know what I was doing, just went in my buddy's backyard in Michigan where I grew up, and shot the first buck that rolled up, and I was like, oh, and it just like went like 60 yards, and I watched it drop, and I was like, well, that was pretty easy. I was kind of like, just kind of like, well, I felt like I cheated, like I was just like, like, I don't know. I didn't earn it, like I was just like, I went up 2 days in the woods and shot my deer, and like, that was it. And so since then I put down hunting for a while. I was just like, I don't know, that was weird. And then, I kind of had this big life change around 25, 26. And was just like, all right, I was a teacher for a while. I was in grad school studying biology, and I was like, nope, like I want to do something else. And so I eventually moved out west and kind of had a big transformation, started working in wilderness therapy with at-risk youth, and started learning primitive skills, ancestral skills. And so that was kind of the big shift for me. I was like, I want to start hunting again, but I want to go this more primitive, ancestral kind of way. So I sold my compound bow. I was like, I'm never shooting this thing again. And that was hard. That was talk about an ego death there, of going from a compound to, learning how to make your own stuff. And so, yeah, so for the last over 10 years, I've been teaching these skills and also learning these skills. So learning how to, I started with like, how do I tan a deer hide? Because I remember watching my buddies in Michigan just killing the deer. And then I'm like, well, what do you do with the skin? And they're like, oh, just throw it in the woods, And so really learning from like the ground up, like, okay, how do I make bone tools? How do I use the sinew? How do I butcher the meat? How do I tan the deer hide? How do I make my own bow? How do I make my own, arrowheads? How do I make my own stone points? And so for the last number of years, I've been kind of refining those skills, learning those skills from different teachers and different gatherings around the country. And I'd say just in the last 4 years, I've really been like, okay, I feel good about my bow. I feel good about my arrows. I feel good about my points. Let's go actually learn the skill of hunting. And yeah, so I've been, I got to do some hunting on Naked and Afraid with my bows that I made, and that was really fun and awesome and really cool experience. Too long of a story to tell here, but really, really beautiful. Yeah, and since then I've been doing some elk hunting out west last couple of years in Wyoming, and that's been a blast. Hunting a little bit here in the mountains, but man, I'll tell you, being a Michigan boy, and then coming down to the mountains and trying to hunt whitetail in the mountains here in North Carolina, I'm getting more ego deaths. Just like, man, just like it is hard hunting in these mountains. So at least that's my story. So
low deer numbers, or what is the reason why it's harder?
Definitely low deer numbers. I also don't have a ton of what I've been hunting. I have 20 acres, and what the deer are doing on my land is just passing through. I did have some bucks bedding at the very top of my ridge, but I'm like, it takes me like 45 minutes to walk up my ridge, and it's like, it's a workout. But I think the biggest thing is just like hunting out west is the thermals, and how the deer use the thermals of either the wind going uphill or the wind going downhill to stay safe. And so I don't know how many times I've been walking up to my stand or walking up, to the spot, and I'm just spooking them because those thermals are just giving me away. And so that's one trick. But just learning the mountains in general, just like, oh yeah, they're not on the ridge. They're not at the low point. A lot of the smart bucks are walking right in the middle, And so on my land, I got like 10 different lanes, every 20 feet up the mountain. It's like, which lane is it going to be today? Like, I don't know, So, so yeah, and I'm doing it the hard way, like if I always say, I've done a little rifle hunting and that's been fun when I want to fill the freezer. But yeah, it's like when I have my own bow and my arrows and a stone point and I'm still learning how to shoot, I got to get within 20 yards and that's not always easy. So seen a lot of deer at 30, 40 yards at times. So
yeah. Wow.
So, yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
I was going to say the bows. What kind of material are you using to make them? Are they self-bow style? Are you doing like more complex glass backed? Is it sinew backed? What are you making?
All self bows. So I predominantly make all my bows out of OSAGE because I am OSAGE obsessed. It is my favorite, one of my favorite organisms in the whole world. It's just the coolest tree ever. Wood is bright yellow. It's one of it's the most dense wood in North America. Its seeds were spread by giant ground sloths and mammoths. Like, it's just a badass tree, and it makes some of the most beautiful bows. It's one of the best bow woods in the world. And so we're blessed to have it on this continent. And so I love going and like hunting for it and just like looking at 500 trees before I cut one for bow staves. So just self bows out of Osage. So I can't get enough Osage. I could talk about Osage probably for a whole hour if you want.
Well, let's talk about Osage.
Okay, let's do it.
One thing I would
do you propagate?
Yeah.
Do you propagate Osage?
I do. Yeah. Not super well, but I've gotten some seedlings. And I like to hand them out to people when I can. Like, oh, here's go plant these Osage trees somewhere. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Sometimes I take the hedge balls. I take the hedge balls and I put them in a bucket and mash them up and put water in it and let it soak for like 2 days and dig a trench, put them in it and then cover it up. And then hopefully more hedgerow grows there,
Yeah, you're probably swimming in them where you are in the world, right?
Oh, yeah. Not clay, but we are, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Not me at all. I did actually pick some a couple years ago when I was in Kentucky, and I brought the fruits back and gave them to the Greenspire school here where my son goes. They have it's like outdoor based education, and they have a greenhouse. They sprouted a whole bunch of them, and they were set to plant them out. And I guess some kids over the summer failed to water most of the plants in the greenhouse and they died. Anyway, I'll have to do that again. But
I'll send you
some question.
More.
Yeah. I had a question for you about, this is kind of off topic, but the mulberry is in the exact same family as the Osage, right? So have you ever made a bow from a mulberry or is that worth investigating?
I'm trying to open up my, let's see. I'm trying to open up my experience with different trees. Like, one of my other primitive buddies is laughing at me. He's like, "Oh, you want to make things from your landscape, and then you go drive 4 hours in your car in Kentucky. There's a hickory tree right there. Just make a bow out of that. Not the same. But I did cut. I have a lot of mulberry on my land, and I hollarded, aggressively. Cut a couple of them this last year, and one of them had a really nice straight 6-foot section. So I probably have 4 staves in my basement right now that are seasoning. So I might try a mulberry here soon. It's similar enough. It might be a good gateway wood to get me to the other species.
I'm actually pretty impressed that you knew the word pollarding. Pollarding is like such a English terminology, but I guess if you're doing baskets, that does make sense. I have
Yeah.
I have a willow tree in my backyard in the house that I just bought that I plan on pollarding
Oh, cool.
this winter sometime. Yeah.
What kind of willow is it?
I think it's just like a black willow.
Okay.
We have lots of black willow here. Not good for baskets.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was one of my favorite things. So I was hunting on this private ranch for elk these last 2 years, and I just had my mind blown that the willow out there is like actually good for baskets. And they just were like clearing sections with machines, like cutting back this willow. And so we'd find these like just giant patches of willow, just like perfect for the picking, perfect for baskets. And so we were like having some slow days, like the herd was on the other side of the property, where we couldn't hunt them. And it's like, all right, let's make some baskets. So we just like cut this green willow and just sitting by this creek. And like, man, I'm super jealous of those people out west that get that willow just growing wild and free. You don't have to tend it, unlike basket willow, which is, if it doesn't have the right soil conditions and there's a weed growing next to it, it's gonna die. Come on, man.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to OSAGE. I didn't want to derail you with my talk. I was impressed that you knew the word pollarding, because not a lot of people know that word.
So let's talk about the self bows and utilizing the OSAGE. I mean, are you using primitive tools or modern tools, or what are you using to make them?
I'm using modern tools. Okay. Yeah. I've not gone into that's my hope when I get, I don't know, a little bit. I always say for a primitive skills technologist, I'm a good bowyer. I'm pretty good at making bows, but for a bowyer, I'm a pretty bad bowyer. Like to the professionals who are doing this all the time, they're great bows. I'm making. OSAGE makes it kind of idiot proof. That's another reason I like using OSAGE. One, where I live in, Southern Appalachia, we have mold all over the place. And it's just like everything natural is just covered in mold if you're not living in an air conditioned house. Like it's a gnarly thing down here. It affects people's health. Like it's a constant battle. That's part of our environment. So OSAGE, only the sapwood molds, and with the bow, you're not using the sapwood. So that's one reason I love it. I can store it in my basement and it doesn't get moldy. It doesn't rot. It's like cedar. It's like locust. It's rot resistant. And the other reason is that when I teach about OSAGE, I'm like, well, every bow wood, has its own characteristics. And the two main characteristics you need for good bow wood is tensile strength and compression strength. And so one side of the bow, right, is bending and needs to be strong and tensile, and the other side is getting smaller and is compressing. And so things like hickory, right? Hickory is like 10 out of 10. If it was a trading card, hickory would have a 10 out of 10 skill for the tensile strength. And in compression, it's like a 7 out of 10. Not so great. There's ways you can heat treat it, and that's what indigenous people did. And we're figuring that out now as modern day bowyers, that you can heat treat it and the compression gets it like to a 9 out of 10, like pretty good. OSAGE is like a 10 out of 10 in compression, and it's like a 9.5 out of 10 in the tensile strength. So when you're a beginner bowyer, if you can find OSAGE, like use it, because that wood is just going to be able to, like, you don't have to have the perfect tiller on it, and it's going to like, it's got training wheels. It's a bumper, it's training wheels for you to be a bad bowyer and have little mistakes here and there, and it's still going to shoot, it's still going to last. And then when it does rain, this super dense wood doesn't absorb moisture. Ryan Gill from Hunt Primitive has done a lot of really cool data collection on hickory and other white woods, and how when it rains, if you don't seal them properly, how much weight, how much poundage you lose in shooting those bows. So another sweet reason is that OSAGE is so dense, it just doesn't really get affected by moisture.
So what would we be sealing them with if we were sealing them? Like boiling linseed, or what are we talking for?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how, how primitive do you want to get here, how ancestral, how accurate, So bear fat, animal fat, so I'm sure beaver, like woodchuck, would work as well, but mixed in with beeswax, which is not indigenous to this country, what else was he using in his trials? I don't do my primitive seeds.
Right.
I go to tung oil, and I'm like, I don't use the petroleum stuff, but I'm somewhere in between as far as on that spectrum of primitive. So, but yeah, bear fat and waxes, I believe, is the main thing people are using for.
Do you seal your arrows as well with the tung oil then?
I don't seal my arrows. No, I don't use river cane because river cane's rarish down here. So I use the like non-native equivalent of a Japanese arrow wood. So that seems to be another thing that doesn't seem to be super affected by moisture. They're pretty robust.
So are you growing the wood then for the arrows, or are you just buying shafts or shaft wood?
People use Japanese arrow wood for like ornamentals. So like I'll just drive around and I'll see a big patch, and I'll slam on my brakes, and I'll go knock on their door and like, hey, I teach skills, can I borrow? And they're usually like, oh my god, cut all you want, that thing's out of control. So that's where I get most of mine.
Okay.
Wow. So you can actually use river cane though, like Rundinaria gigantea. Wow, that's cool. That's a plant that's like on a bucket list for me. Like I would love to see a patch of that in real life. I've read the stories, and it's just a shame what was done, to the landscape.
Well, I mean, wasn't that like in part of the Kentucky with like all the settlers and stuff? There was big river cane patches back in the like Boonesboro days, or I mean,
yeah, but you're talking the whole southeast. River cane used to be everywhere. They said there'd be stretches of river that were like miles long that was like one organism, that would all flower at once and then simultaneously die.
Yep.
That's crazy.
I can't, it's hard to fathom those cane patches and what they look like. And like, but yeah, it's one of the like, one of the most used and sacred plants to the indigenous people of the Southeast. So the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, everything from baskets. I don't know if you've ever seen bamboo basketry, but it's like splitting, super fine, and then weaving with it. I have some river cane baskets that are just beautiful works of art. Atlatl darts, blow guns, arrows, like thatching, or not thatching, but I guess not thatching, but the sides, like weaving like a wattle.
Like wattle.
So it was a super important plant to the people who live down in this neck of the woods. But yeah, I want to try to I got a little creek on my land, so I'm trying to plant some native river cane down on my creek, just to have it. But it's not easy to transfer, is what I've learned. I've talked to a couple legendary plant folk down here and be like, hey, how did Doug Elliott was one of them, and Sam Thayer came down to see Doug Elliott's bamboo patch because, like you said, Clay, when it flowers, it's like a once in a lifetime thing. And so Doug Elliott, who's this legendary storyteller in my community, he had a big patch and it flowered. And the story is that Sam Thayer, the wild edible, plant guy, came all the way down from Wisconsin to go see this, to collect the seeds from the bamboo, because apparently that was a big food staple, is what some people think. Ago. And he like stayed for like 6 hours, collected all the seeds he could, and then drove back to Wisconsin.
We're gonna have Sam on pretty quick here, and we'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah, ask him about that. That's just what I heard from Doug and Todd. So,
that's funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, the river cane though had a lot of uses, but also apparently the animals really liked it. So it was the best place to hunt, which I always find is funny. Like you read these stories, and many like pioneer people, would go through and they'd be like, oh, this is great hunting, and then like farmers come through and they're like, get this crap out of here.
Yeah.
And it's like that interface of like the people who are like leading the way or whatever are like, this is amazing, I can't believe the animal life here. And then waves of settlers come in and just destroy it all and farm it. It's weird.
Then they destroy it, they'd grow crops on it, and then say it was an old field and couldn't grow anything else on it, and then move on and slash and burn something else and do the same thing all over again, rather than learn how to work with the land using European style farming tactics, and then realizing that they're just destroying everything in the process.
like, let's get rid of all this habitat and all these animals so
Yep.
that we could grow food, chase all this food away so we could grow our food.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Terrible.
Luke Oswald, when you say European style, though, that's just actually one style of Europe's. Like, because there was a lot of
True. True.
Laplander. There's a lot of like native style agricultural systems in Europe that were pushed out by like Roman style
Right.
farming.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. I should have said Roman style farming.
Yeah.
Anti-empire farming.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
empire, the evil galactic empire farming.
Blame the empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I do feel like that is an important thing to note, though, like because a lot of people, there's like the catch-all thing nowadays. It's just like Europeans, and it's like
True.
that's just like we don't want to lump every single native culture in with being like all just natives. You know, I prefer to say Anishinaabe or whatever. You know, and I think it's equally as important to say, you know, not every European is like someone from like Rome. You know?
Well, that's what's crazy though, Clay. I mean, they impacted the Romans literally anywhere in the, continent of Europe, Africa. The Romans impacted those cultures to the point to where a lot of them lost their own culture. Like the Gauls, any of them. I mean, barbarians up in the Germanic tribes even lost some of their culture before they decided they had enough. That's what's crazy.
Yeah. And hearkening back to what we were talking about at the beginning, one culture, Romans, goes around destroying everybody and
destroying culture,
destroying cultures, and then it ruins their, ability to emote with one another.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
And then it's just this wave after wave of everybody doing the same thing that got done to them.
Totally, yeah. Genocide's happening, and then just destroying culture, which is once again the most important human part. Like when you were talking about it, Luke, of just like how everyone's messed up and we don't have community and we don't have, it's like, yeah, and that's like when I truly teach human survival, like all the things we don't think about necessarily with survival, like community, but also like singing and dancing and ritual and ceremony and rites of passage and elders and mentoring, like those were all intact parts of human culture throughout the whole world. And that these empires come in, say, hey, we farm this way and we'll have the biggest crops, and then we can, have more people, and then we can wage more war and we can grow more food, and so on and so on. So these genocides have happened, and that's kind of the best way I've found as a person who has, I come from empires, I am, all my ancestry is from the British Isles, which different degrees of how much, the empire was, they were 500 years ago, they were Irish. There's still, people speaking their native indigenous tongue in Ireland. So it's good I like what you said, Clay, of like diversifying, like what we mean when we say European. There's a lot of different cultures there. But the best thing I've been able to do as a person who grew up in this empire is to be like, whoa, I am benefiting from this empire. I am in it. So what do I do? How can I go back and bring back more of these parts of culture that we have lost? How can I be an ally to the cultures that do remain? But I'm kind of in that way culturally an orphan. I don't know my native tongue. I don't know the songs my ancestors sing. I don't know the sacred plants. And that's like really shitty and sad. And it brings up a ton of grief in my life. And it's a beautiful opportunity for me to recreate it. And that's what I love doing, is just like, okay, this is in my family line now, OSAGE is a sacred plant, right? Like this is my plant that I pray to, and I can start it over again. I'm going to teach it to my future kid, and so there's a real beauty in that too, of not stealing other people's culture that still exists, but using it as a template of like, well, what were the important things to people around the world? Oh, they had sacred plants, they had sacred songs, they had sacred ceremonies. And I can use that to start this long process of rebuilding my culture that, I've lost down the line.
Yeah, no, I feel you, man. I got 3 kids, and I've kind of been feeling that way too. Like you can kind of appreciate and enjoy some of the things that the native people did, but ultimately also we have so many invasive species on the land and so many different things that the world here is a different place. And I try to create this like loop in my kids' lives where, every year we have like a few specific things that we really like to do. One being like wild blueberry camp. Every summer we go up and we spend like 4 or 5 days harvesting blueberries as a family. And that's like a real sacred berry for us, like we eat like, well, I think this year we got close to 30 gallons. And like stuff like that. But it's important because we were just talking about the other day, I have a 13-year-old, and I was just lamenting, like, God, I hope when he's like in his 20s, he still wants to come blueberry picking, because we can try to set up that culture all we want, but ultimately it is their decision if they're gonna, keep it up or not.
Totally. Yeah, man. Yeah. And like what do teenagers and young adults, what they're into, like getting acceptance and love from other teenagers. So if you're like, oh, I'm the weird teenager because I pick blueberries every year, like it's going to be hard for them to continue. So hats off to you though. That's like, I love that. That's one of my things I do too, is like every season I have a thing, and so I go, have elk camp. I go hunt elk in August, and in right now in the winter, this is my Osage harvest time. So it's like every few months, I'm like, oh, I got my trip coming up. I'm gonna like go do the thing, and I think that just gives me so much meaning and connection. Like every season, I'm stoked to go play in the woods for one reason or another. So I think you're onto something there. I think that's what we're supposed to do.
Yep. I think even if they get away from it, Clay, and this is like my thought too, one, never push them into it, because then they're going to hate it. Bring them along for the experience and the journey. And then at some point, you're just going to have to accept that they're going to get away from it. But planting that seed, building that foundation, they're going to come back to it. You see it time and time again. I've got so many friends that, we all got away from hunting at some point, and some of them hunted almost their entire childhood, and their dads were just amazing whitetail hunter, and he totally got away from it for a long, long time, up until he was like 28. But then all of a sudden he's like, hey man, you're bow hunting again? Yeah, I'm bow hunting. Let's go together. Okay. And then it was just that cycle again. And now he's got a kid and he's taking that kid, and it's doing the same thing all over again. So, I mean, it comes back full circle as long as you put that in there. Otherwise, it's just going to be, they're going to have to find their own thing. But by you building that foundation, you're sharing those memories and everything with them. They'll come back.
Yeah. I really hope so. Anyway, I actually don't really worry about my son because he goes to a hippie school. He's outside all the time. It's actually my 10-year-old daughter. She's the one who, like, whenever we'll be like, we're gonna go on a hike. Like we went to go get spring water yesterday, and she it's Christmas Day. We went out to go do like a hike as a family, and she's just like, I want to stay home. And of course she had fun when she was out there, but I think it's that motivation thing. Like when she's 22, is she gonna be motivated to get out on her own? I kind of at this point I'm like, I hope so, but I don't know.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anywho, what other plants you got? What other seasons and things? And also at some point I would love to hear about your elk hunting.
Oh yeah. Let's see. What other seasons? What do I do?
We've got sapping season right around the corner.
Yeah, yeah. And down here, really right around the corner for us. I got to tap my trees down here in like end of January, start of February.
Oh wow,
crazy!
Okay.
It's nuts.
Wow. Yeah.
I started getting into that a little bit. Springtime always feels like that's I've been really getting into birds lately. It's kind of a super nerdy thing, but bird language and understanding. I always say the birds are the nervous system of the forest, and so if you can hear what state the birds are in, what's going on in the forest. But birding has been really sweet. That's when everyone's getting frisky in the birds, and so I'm just like going out and seeing what I can spot, and some of that one bird app now that I don't know if the Merlin. Oh man, that's just fun, because then I can like, oh, I didn't know I had a black Burnian warbler in my backyard. Now I'm like on a mission, So I've gotten pretty old and nerdy with that, I'd say. But yeah, elk hunting has been a really fun one. So that's in August, and go out to. I kind of had a door open to me because of the way I hunt. And the rancher out in Wyoming, he was just like, he goes to primitive skills gatherings. I was like, oh, you know this stuff, like come and hang out. And I think he's just like the black sheep compared to all the ranchers out there. And he's just stoked to have people of like mind who are just like not trophy hunters, not chasing antlers, but just are like, oh my God, look at these resources. He's got like 30,000 acres.
Oh,
nice. He's got public access to the Platte River, and there's trout everywhere. I mean, we were just, dipping our lines in the water. Oh, trout, oh, trout, just like, it's just stupid amazing. And I keep saying to my friends, like, it feels like a video game when I go out there where, I'm like, oh, there's a badger. Oh, there's a porcupine. Oh, there's an owl, I'm like, it's so many animals, so many like amazing nature moments that I've never had before. Every time I go out hunting, that it's a dream. It's how I imagine nature felt, or hunting or fishing felt before, the genocide and the destruction of our environment in America. Just really so. But yeah, elk has been, and so it's really odd elk hunting. What we're doing out there. Me and my buddy have been going, and I took my nephew this last year actually, and took my nephew 2 times. My buddy Bear came with us this time, and it's like, it's not like mountain hunting. It's kind of, there's a lot of water on this land. I mean, it's like super, super desert. And then there's like springs popping out of the earth. So the elk are literally like, it's kind of like I'm pig hunting for elk. So I'm like in the swamps, like sneaking into like their bedding areas and trying to call them and move them. So I stalked my first year. It was like the second day I stalked this cow elk to like, I was on top of her. I mean, I didn't know she was there. It's this willow thicket, and I was like choke cherries, and I'm just like walking, and all of a sudden I'm like on top. I think I was 7 yards away, and she had no idea it was there, and she was just chilling, and I'm like, I still have yet to kill an animal with my stone points. So when I was in Naked and Afraid, I killed 2 impala with my self bow, but I was using steel arrowheads. So I'm always like, oh, that's cheating. Like, that doesn't count.
Kind of is, man. What are you doing?
My wife's always like, I think that counts. I'm like, no, it doesn't count.
So at 7 yards, you had the cow though, right? Did you?
Yeah. So I had this, I'm like, so I'm like trying to calm my breath, and man, I was just shaking, and like I was probably there for a minute, just watching her eat. She had no idea. And so I went through all my steps and freaking shot perfectly high, just like right in no man's land, like not quite the spine, just like. But the thing I was most worried about with my stone points is penetration. Like, I'm pulling like a 55-pound bow, which is not super heavy for elk. My stones, I'm mostly like, okay, how did that do? But when I did shoot her, she literally didn't move on the first shot, and just the fletchings were sticking out. That's like, okay, like that's 19 inches or something like that, of more than that, 20 some inches of penetration. So I thought like, okay, there might be a chance. And so she just stood there, and she was like, what the hell was that? Oh shit. And so like I start trying to reach for, another arrow, and I'm like, freaking out, and she's starting to see me move. I mean, I'm still on top of her, but they don't have great eyesight, and so she started moving, and I let one go, but I missed. She's booking it, and she just went into like chest high water, just like in the funk. And so I'm like, all right, I guess I'm gonna, I've heard that, like pigs, if you shoot them, unlike whitetail, they'll just run like 50 yards, and then they'll like kind of like look back and be like, what the hell was that? So I was like, all right, let's do it. So I just like jump in, got my bow over my head. I'm like wading through all this shit, anyway, found her in a clearing, and she did just that. She ran 50 yards, came out again, I coming up to her, tried to get another shot, but she ended up running. And wow. Yeah, I never found her. Nothing ever died that we could tell. We could follow the vultures, but we didn't see anything like that. So that was my like day 2, like first elk I saw. I had some other great, like had someone calling for me, and had a herd of 100 in front of me one day, and that was super fun. didn't end up getting a shot on that. My nephew took a couple shots with his compound. He was shooting with his compound, missed. He's a Michigan boy, and he was not used to using his rangefinder, so he misquoted 2 shots on some elk. So we were licking our wounds the first year.
Wow.
But then we came back this year, and we had a herd right next to where we were camping. And so my buddy and I, Bear, were up on the ridge. My nephew Asher was down, and he there's this elk herd. It was probably about 70 head, I'd say, and they were just super cozy and settled down. And so the play was that my nephew Asher was going to come in from one direction, and if the elk moved, we were going to, my buddy Bear and I were going to cut him off at this pass. And so we're watching my nephew put on this stalk. We got binoculars, and we're watching him from top of this mountain, and he's taking his time, and and it was like 2 hours we were watching him, and he'd get in close and he kind of back up, but for 4 hours he was within 80 yards on this herd. I mean, it was a long stalk. He got rained on, hail came out, a rainbow came out. The whole herd sniffed him at one point. We were like, oh, he's done. There's no way the herd's going to chill. He chilled out. And so he ended up getting a shot on a nice cow at 22 yards and got both lungs and a little liver. And so,
nice.
Yeah, we brought home some elk this year.
That's
so
cool.
That's awesome.
But once again, it's more about just getting to play on that land and make baskets and find sheds and find arrowheads and fish, and just it's just the most human I've ever felt whenever I go hunting, and y'all probably get it, when you're just out there and I'm not teaching. I'm not, what I normally do in the woods. It's just what do I want to do? Just go play, whatever it feels like in the moment. So it's really, really special. I hope all humans get to experience that freedom of getting to play in the woods.
So when you're hunting, are you wearing modern clothes or traditional, primitive clothing?
I wear my Sitka. So although, that's another edge I could push. I could make it even harder on myself. But, I make a lot of buckskin, and that was my thing for a long time. So I could cook up a little outfit here that I think would be pretty fun to wear. But
yeah.
Once you get that buckskin in the water, oh man.
That's the thing. I don't understand. So this is the one thing I have a hard time grasping. So all these hunters, Boone or even the indigenous, whatever, wearing buckskins, right? Mm-hmm. And they're out hunting and getting wet. What the heck are they doing? Just roaming around in wet ass buckskins that are shrinking on them as they're going, and
wet ass buckskin wob
squeaking. Wob.
I think that's exactly what they were doing, because if there's one thing that I have gleaned from all the information in the books I've read is people just seem to be able to tolerate more than we do nowadays.
Yeah.
A lot more discomfort.
Yeah,
true.
For sure. That's
true.
100% true. I'm pretty sure on that one. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think a lot has been lost on hide. I mean, all these skills, but particularly hide tanning. I think there are a few things that, that I've been playing with, for example, that I'm kind of pushing back on what people think buckskin has to be. And so I'm well, what if we didn't use smoke? What if we use tannins, and a whole bunch of primitive people were you can't do that. You need the smoke or else it's going to harden up and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I'm
what
no,
about,
it doesn't.
Yeah, what about waxing buckskins or oiling the buckskins to wear?
Yeah. So what one option is that we called it white people saw these outfits and were oh, this is just buckskin. And it's all the same thing. Right. But there is grain on buckskin. It's not really buckskin, but more traditional grain on leather that you can make and impregnate it with smoke as opposed to tannins, and it will be more waterproof than if you were to remove the grain or that epidermis layer. So that's something I've seen some people play around with. But yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when I'm in the woods and I'm wearing my buckskin shorts and it rain's coming, I just get naked. I get naked. I put my shorts under a log and I just sit there in the rain, just butt ass naked, just wait for the rain to pass. Nice. We get short summer storms in the South. So then I'm okay, it's done raining. Put my shorts back on instead of because when you get buckskin wet, it's you're wearing a wet lasagna noodles. It's
Right,
just like
right.
so gross.
Yeah. One thing that I know, has been talked about a lot is the Pacific Northwest natives, though, didn't use any buckskin at all as a clothing because it's so rainy out there. And actually, one of the adaptations that happens in rainy places like that is people start to wear no clothes. And a lot of Pacific Northwest people were either completely butt naked or wearing like cedar skirts.
Yeah, I was gonna say twined like basswood or cedar is what I've seen
Yeah.
some places too. Yeah.
And then same thing was said. Charles Darwin went through Tierra del Fuego, and super rainy place down at the bottom. And once again, he butt ass naked people everywhere.
Oh,
And you're talking like not warm temperatures either, like cold temperatures. But I think that if your body has the choice, I think if you have the choice, like, okay, am I going to wear soggy clothes or am I just going to be naked?
uh-huh.
You're probably going to adapt to being naked because you're like, it would probably be warmer.
Right.
Totally. Oh
Right.
yeah. You're gonna be warmer than wearing wet buckskin for sure. But the other thing I've seen too, because that's been one of my big mysteries, is like, yeah, how did people stay dry? What was their rain gear? And the one I'm thinking of was uh Ishi. I was about to say Osho.
That's what I was
I'm
going
like,
to say. They found Ishi laying naked on the road, right? On the side of the road.
yeah, well, I always say like Ishi, and like especially this is the other thing I say, like every time we have documented stuff from indigenous people of this continent, I always say take it with a grain of salt because it's after a giant genocide has happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I was reading about, I'm tanning a buffalo hide right now, and everyone's like, oh, well, some people, the Plains Indians didn't even tan them that well because it was just like, and they would harden up when it would rain. And I'm like, well, yeah, but like, is that really their best work? Like after a genocide, after they're, like dying off, it's probably not their best work. So, but maybe, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Ishi, he had a little poncho. So he had like a little ring around his neck, like a necklace. And then from that, he hung like 10 different animal hides, fur on, tanned. So like a fox and an otter and then a bobcat. And that the fur was it pushed away the moisture so he could stay underneath it. And all the animals were around him. And the fur and those long guard hairs, would whisk away the moisture. So that was one cool like animal poncho I've seen.
How cool would it be to actually like be Saxon Pope and hanging out and hunting and learning how to make bows with Ishi? That just seems like, I mean, the opportunity that they got versus what we have now is just, I mean, he was like, well, truly a dying breed. He was the last one. I mean, you'll never know. You'll never know anything other than what's documented from those two individuals that documented his work.
And like flint knapping was, I teach this when I teach flint knapping, is like we are of the lineage of Ishi now because Ishi showed like how to pressure flake with like he used nails that he found or on the railroad and like would pressure flake. So take small flakes and finish his arrowheads with this pressure flaking tool. And now in the flint knapping community, it's called an Ishi stick. Like we still use his name. And it's just like, it's, all these skills go through these bottlenecks of like almost forgetting how to do this skill, and then somehow it like survives and hopefully thrives and gets spread and reshared again and again. And we remember, oh yeah, there's other ways to tan buckskin that make it more, waterproof.
Right.
Another example of that is wayfinding. So the Polynesian wayfinders, that was one guy who it was down to one last wayfinder, and he was some random dude in like the Philippines or something, and he ended up teaching all these people. And if that one guy hadn't done it, like nobody would know those skills today.
Wow. When was that?
That was actually pretty recently. I think in the last 50 years.
I thought it was in I thought it was like 1960s or 70s, right?
Okay, then, yeah, but wouldn't that be the last 50 years?
Well, sure. I thought it was like maybe 1960s or something like that. And he taught a few people, and one of them was a woman, and I don't remember what university she worked for or whatever, but they ended up starting a research like project and ended up doing the whole big thing where they actually started wayfinding, and they taught others along the way. And and would do these journeys and travel the same routes, and then how like the currents would actually they'd switch and transverse at whatever time of the year for like a couple days, and then they could make their way back from the journey. That's pretty cool.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And there's like, just imagine how much of that knowledge is like on reservations in this country alone, just like that's just like not maybe being documented. It's just like, it just like drives me crazy. Like
one of the coolest things that ever happened was I can't remember what university it was, but they did the Foxfire books with all the Appalachian knowledge. It's like, can you imagine if all that was lost? Like, what the heck, man?
That's actually what I was going to bring up. I have a neighbor, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, who are like, Miss Wilson's the only one alive now. She's like 94, still sharp as a tack. She was born in this valley. She's going to die in this valley. Her family's all over. All my neighbors are her family. And her husband, Mr. Wilson, he grew up here too. And he grew, apples and pears. And when I met him a few years ago, he had a stroke and he couldn't talk. He was still with it mentally, but he couldn't talk. And I told him what I did. And he was a bear hunter, and he had all this Appalachian knowledge, but he couldn't speak. And I was just like, oh my God, this is like so painful. Like he's going to die. And like, his knowledge didn't get written down or videotaped or,
Did you give
his
him a
daughter
chalkboard? Something to write on? Did you give him something?
I don't think he even had motor skills. Like it was it was a tragedy, but I'm sure he taught some people. I just don't know him. So,
yeah. So bear hunting, I know that you had mentioned, and I was curious to bring this up. You have a dog that you said you were going to potentially use as a bear dog, but I thought that was so fascinating because it's not like a trained bear dog. You just have like a dog that you're just like, it's like a wild animal that you're just like, here, come along and hunt with me.
Wait, what? A wild animal?
No,
so,
not like
I have so Bojangles is one of my dog's names. And I got him. He's like coming up on 8 now. And, when I first got him, I was like, I'm not going to hunt with my dog, but we've hunted together. I mean, kind of unintentionally a lot of times, but we've taken a lot of critters together, raccoons and woodchucks. We took a young deer together one time, which was a crazy story. That was in a different country though. So that was yes, allegedly. I'm just bullshitting now. But my dog kept we have a lot of bear down here in Blue Ridge and Southern Appalachia. And my dog, like when he could come across bears, he would turn into just a beast. Like, he's a sweet dog. He's like a husky pit bull collie mix. He kind of looks like what you might call him, the Dutch Shepherd. It's like not quite a German Shepherd look, but he chased these bears up in a tree. And like this one time I had this mom coming in, this female bear, and she would just eat his dog food. She ate like 30 pounds of dog food in one sitting one time. And so she'd come every night and Bo would just keep putting her up in trees. And eventually it became almost like a game. And I had to like go out and like grab my dog and like, like the bear's ass is like right there. She would only like climb like 10 feet in the tree. And so I've had enough moments. He's probably put, 15 different times he's put a bear in a tree just by himself. He just freaks out and these bears are hunted by dogs. So they're afraid of dogs. So I'm like, maybe, if I went out with Bo and just walked enough, eventually we'd come up, on these bear. But my guess is that every time he's put a bear in a tree, it's not been during hunting season. Because when trained dogs get on bears, they run for miles and miles and miles, so I feel like the bear knows when it's hunting season. It's like, oh no, if I get in a tree now, they're going to shoot me, so I'm totally inexperienced in bear hunting. I've never done it. I watch, it's an old tradition down here. And I've, it's been a cool thing that the tradition down here has been all the men kind of in the community here go bear hunting. And then when they get one, they donate it to the family that's really, really poor, and doesn't have any food to eat for the winter. And so they give them a whole bear. And so, I've seen them do that. And that's really sweet, and I don't love the style of hunting they do with their GPS collars and, sitting in their truck drinking beer. But, but
tradition's tradition though.
It's tradition. Yeah. Like I respect the tradition. So,
yeah. But, I actually Yeah, I remember you making a post about that. And what is curious to me, and maybe Luke Oswald, if you've talked to people on the podcast about this, but how long has the GPS thing been going on for? Because um, like for instance, I find myself I got my own little squirrel dog now, you know, and I find myself wanting to be like real old school about it. Like I feel hesitant to do the GPS collar because like on one hand, like I want to know where he's at and I want to know he's safe because I don't want him to get like killed by a coyote because he's a little dog. But then on the other hand, it's like I want to learn how to be athletic and just chase after my dog. And the way that like Daniel Boone did, or sorry, not Daniel Boone, David Crockett, he was a
Yeah.
famous bear hunter and he would actually run with his dogs.
But
And
I honestly,
yeah.
in the 90s they came about, but they haven't been super popular until like 2000. So we're talking almost 40 years now, Clay, if you realize
Okay.
that.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I mean, the past 20 years is where they've really, really taken off. It's smaller technology. You can have it on an app on your phone and track your dogs, and guys are doing that a lot more. I mean, well, one, you lose less dogs. You're able to know property boundaries. If you have to call them back, you can now shock them, or at
Mhm.
least give them like an alert. Not necessarily shock them, but just tap it to let them know, hey, get off the track or whatever. Because as you know, there's the ever increasing loss of public lands as well, and therefore
Yeah.
there's a lot less places you can actually run your dogs, or private land and permissions and all that kind of stuff comes into factor, to where how the heck do you get a dog off a track where you couldn't
Yeah.
before? So I mean, there is a lot of good things that have come with it, so people aren't getting into trouble as far as trespassing and things like that. But yeah, I agree with you. If you can do it the old school way and be able to get away with it, it makes more sense to do it that way. But once again, you're not out searching all night either, because a lot of
Mhm.
times, I mean, if you've only got a couple hours and you work a day job versus hunting is your livelihood, it makes a big difference whether or not you're out till 6:30 in the morning trying to find one or two dogs that took off on a track and you don't know where they are. So
Yeah.
there's pros and cons to everything, but yeah, I mean, if you could get away with doing it the other way, that'd be the way I'd want to do it as well.
And that's what we talked about it on Instagram, Clay. I was just like,
Mhm.
like it's good for me to zoom out and be like, I know I'm a purist. I know I could be like come off as like pretentious of like, I'm only gonna hunt this way, but like
Mhm.
humans have been using technology as a way to advance our health and our living for forever. Like at one point someone flint knapped a stone arrowhead in a certain way and some old timer was like, oh, you're doing it like I just use wood and spears, like
Yeah.
and so it's like I still use like plastic strings on my bow. Like I'm not the sinew bow kind of guy yet, and so
Are you braiding your own though? We got to ask these questions as they come
oh
up,
yeah,
but
I'm
yeah,
making my own
okay.
bowstrings,
So
but just
you're
with
like
like
Flemish
background.
twists, or what are you doing?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
Flemish twist,
Okay.
nothing too crazy. Flemish twist with a timber hitch. And but the point is, the point I'm making is just like, yeah, like if would it be better if I was out hunting and enjoying the woods and interacting with these bear with a little more technology than me sitting on my ass not doing it? Maybe, like
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
I'm not poo-pooing it. Like if it gets you outside and it gets you connected, and I think if it gets you in this state of reverence and appreciation for nature, then do it, like so I always got to check myself when I start going down the slippery elitist rabbit hole. So
Everybody's in a
Yeah.
different spot.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You have to realize and respect everybody's in a different spot, different stage in their life, a different part of progression that maybe they haven't reached yet compared to you, or maybe they just don't care for it and they just, like you said, want to get out. And you know what? Good for them. Same thing
Yeah.
with French warbow hunters. I'm gonna knock them a little bit, but at the same time, I'm not gonna say they can't get out in the woods with me, and I don't even care.
Yeah.
I'll share an elk hunting area with them too.
Yeah.
So
Um, I yeah, the French warbow, by the way, means crossbow because that's what I jokingly call my crossbow. Um,
That's
but
pretty good. There were the French, yeah, they were into the crossbows. So
yeah. But speaking back to your purism thing, I've had my own thing right? Like, because I've been harvesting wild rice for over a decade now,
Mhm.
and I used to go out and I had like, no, I don't want any technology out here. I don't want any of that stuff, right? And 6 years ago, I started heading out to Minnesota to harvest rice. That's where so I was doing it around here, and our rice is, the tiniest grains you'll ever see,
Mhm.
and it's, you could be out all day and you could get like 60 pounds of rice. So my buddy invited me out to Minnesota, and I was like, let's see what this is like. I go out there, and of course the ricing is way better, way bigger grains everywhere. But
Mhm.
off the very get-go, what I noticed is that, all my preconceived notions about like the way that natives did it or would have done it, or
Mhm.
this, one year I saw a native team going back and forth, and they actually had a flagpole on the back of their canoe with an American flag on it. And they were blasting classic rock on a boombox while they're harvesting rice.
Uh,
And and I was out there, and I'm like, okay, so now actually me and my racing partner, I've slackened so much about that over the years that
mhm.
now me and my racing partner routinely listen to audiobooks while we're out there, listen to
Mhm.
music, we bring a speaker out, and we're just like having a good time, we're like, this is going to be
Totally.
fun, and we're just going to do it, with whatever we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's like, if it feels right to be without those type of technologies, modern technologies, then freaking do it, and if it feels right, and or if it feels like a repression that you're denying parts of yourself to, like, then don't freaking do it, like, I think that's my number one goal as a
Yeah.
teacher, is like to help people feel alive, to be
Yeah.
in this world. That's our mission, is to be alive and to experience it all. And so I think it's great challenges to do less technology and to go without, and to like have those moments of like peace and serenity and less, like there's so much joy in that. So really go for it. And there's no right way to do it. So just go out
Yeah.
and be alive.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I do still like to listen to nothing while I'm out racing, but I'm just saying that we do keep the speaker in case we want to listen to something.
Totally.
You got to think
Um,
about one thing, though, Clay. I mean, if they had the technology back then, they may have done it. You know what I'm saying?
oh yeah.
But they didn't have
Oh,
the technology.
100%.
Therefore, or at least some of them would. And then once again, like you said earlier about the old timers with the points, same thing. What are you doing? You can't be racing like that. There's always
Mhm.
going to be that. But there's a
Oh,
Yeah.
question I got to ask you, Luke, is about you were talking about South America or Central America, right? And you were yeah, I don't remember if you said it was South
I was in
America or Central.
Colombia,
Oh, okay, Bolivia.
South America. Mhm.
But you said you got to do some hunting down there. Were you hunting like boingo or bongo or whatever they are in the jungles? Did you happen to
Oh,
see any of
okay. So
those?
yeah, so
And
two
then,
different things. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. You finish.
And then I was just going to ask you, how the heck did you contend with the bugs? Because I feel like that would be the hardest thing anywhere in Naked and Afraid, would be the bugs and no clothing to have a barrier
Uh,
between them. So,
yeah. So for my second challenge, I did 40 days in Colombia in South
okay.
America. But then my third challenge, I did 21 days by myself in South Africa.
Okay.
So in Colombia, they didn't let us bring any. Well, they let some people bring a bow, and others of us were denied for some reason. So that's weird. Um, but we were mostly doing small game hunting because of that. So we were like going for lizards and tarantulas and cockroaches and stingrays and caiman, which are like small alligators. Um, so yeah, we got to like, that was kind of fun because it was like I ate every single day in 40 days, which was pretty cool because it's just like there's a lot of little things around all the time. Um, so I ate a lot of odd things there. And then in South Africa, it was kind of the opposite, where it's like very few little things, or at least I couldn't catch them. And it was just like, oh, there's a kudu, and there's, antelope, and there's a giraffe, and there's impala. And so that was like all or nothing kind of hunting. And that was, like I said, just a blast. It was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. Totally spiritual, and just, it was a trip. It was a real trip to just like stalk one herd of impala for 10 days while you're starving. and just like, do nothing but hunt. Like that's all I did. And just like the tracks, it's sandy substrate, so the tracks are everywhere. So every night or every day I'd wake up and be like, oh, what happened at night? And I get to see everything that happened with the tracks. And like there's only one spot for water, so I'm just like standing in a tree for, a thorny tree for 12 hours, waiting for a herd to come in and listening to the birds and telling me where the animals are, and like hyenas and lions are coming in. Like it was just a trip. So so that was really, really, really cool experience, to say the least. But bugs, I've been really lucky that the 3 different locations I've been to are all pretty dry, and so the bugs were fairly minimal. We did have a lot of sand fleas in Namibia and in Colombia. So you'd sleep in the sand because it was comfortable, and you just wake up and it was just like bug bites all over. And you were allowed to take like malaria medication just in case, even though there weren't a ton of mosquitoes. And so I was taking an herbal supplement, which was made up of black walnut, artemisia, and clove. It's a pretty gnarly supplement, and it was used for like anti-malaria. It's used in Lyme treatment. And I was just taking it for anti-malaria, and I was like, oh, it's an internal thing just in case I get malaria. But what I found is that all my other friends were just absolutely covered in bug bites. Like I think it was my friend in one quadrant of his back, he had 67 bug bites.
That's weird though. I almost wonder though, just like black walnut's an anti-parasitic as well, right? But
Right.
So you're taking it internally, and then maybe possibly through your sweat and everything, your body is excreting it, thus keeping the parasites or bugs off of you.
That's what I learned, is that I got like very few bites, and everyone's like, what the hell? What's going on with you? And I was like, oh, I think it's this gnarly shit I'm taking.
That's fascinating though.
Yeah, because then it makes sense of like, oh, not only is it stopping the things that to grow inside my body, but it actually stops them from biting me in the first place.
Man.
So when I've gone into like, sometimes I do some pig hunting down in like Florida in the winter, and if I'm like going in a real buggy place, I'll like drink a whole bunch of that tincture beforehand for a few, just to like try to get some smell going on me,
Sweet.
Well,
That's
it's also
awesome.
probably good though, because that's an anti-parasitic, and people like me and you that do have barefoot walking sometimes,
Yeah.
that's we do actually get parasite loads, and I think that it is good to do an anti-parasitic cleanse at least once a year or every so often.
I'll tell you what, I'm about to start one here pretty quick, and I've never done one before, but I have noticed, so this last full moon, I had trouble sleeping the first 2 nights of it. And I don't know if it was because of an actual hatch or something, but I'm going for it now. I've never done it before.
I hope you poop out some worms.
Thank you.
So this is probably like TMI, but my 4-year-old daughter, and this is like very common. Little kids are the most common to get pinworms in the country.
Yeah.
And one of the signs of that is the itchy butt.
Yeah.
And she's been saying to us lately, I got an itchy butt.
Probably.
And so she's actually right now on a parasite cleanse.
Oh, nice.
So,
are you doing the fulvic acid soaks too, or no?
No, I don't know. We're just, we give her the tincture. We've been making her like smoothies with like pumpkin seeds and things like that, because pumpkin seeds are also anti-parasitic. And then but we could do that route, or we could go, take her to the doctor and get some crazy chemical,
no thanks.
But all those things work, and as you pointed out, Luke, they do in fact work. It's like many people in our world have been somehow hoodwinked into thinking that like plants don't work.
Right.
Yeah, I even teach it, and I still get surprised. I've had 2 experiences where I've had one of my friends cut his foot on a tin roofing and hit an artery, and it was like throwing blood, and I was like, oh shit. And so I went and grabbed yarrow, the plant, threw it on there, and it stopped bleeding in like 5 seconds. And I was like, what? Like, I teach this, but I believe in it. And I was like, holy shit, that really worked. I thought we were gonna have to put it on for 10 minutes because it was arterial bleeding, you know. And I did it's another story, but I had a freaking chainsaw in my shoulder and did the same thing, like put Yara on it, stop bleeding like that. And I was like, I can't believe that works so well. It's amazing.
Yeah, my son cut himself one time, and I did the exact same thing that you said. I put yarrow on it, and I was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah, it was
like it stopped the bleeding so fast, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I cut my own leg this last spring with my very, very sharp bill hook. And I was cutting some. I have a little like hand side bill hook thing, and I was cutting, and I sliced into my shin. And I was like, you know, it's on my leg, and of course, so it's just like gushing blood. And I could not find yarrow, and I was like, dang it, man, this would be an awesome time to find yarrow.
So couldn't you use plantain though as well? I mean, a lot of
people, that doesn't coagulate blood.
It just takes away the stinging and the burn then, or the pain from the. Okay.
So generally you would want to look for another astringent plant. So astringent is that drying sensation on your tongue. And so astringent plants are also usually a high source of tannins or tannic acid, which is what you use for making leather, and you can add for preserves for buckskin. So if you can't find that yarrow, that's just one thing that I teach, you know, is just like, all right, like learn tannic plants, because if you get cut, like that'll stop the bleeding. So like oaks, goldenrod, sumac, staghorn sumac, basically, if you're one general rule, all plants have tannins. Those plants I named have a high amount of tannins, but basically all plants use tannins as a defense against mold and fungus and all that stuff. So if you don't know what the hell's going on, and you know the plant's not poisonous right next to you, take it, chew it up, put it on your wound. And what it does to leather is the same thing it does to your skin. It tightens, and what's the word?
Constricts, vascularly constricts or something of that nature.
It's constricting. Yeah. So it'll stop the bleeding. So.
Wow.
Very nice. Yeah. So do you teach herbalism too? Sorry, Clay.
I'm definitely not an herbalist. I teach plants as well. Like I kind of have a very different view of, like, for me, herbalism was really overwhelming, and it was like way too specific. And so I like to teach, it's from Matthew Woods, who's an herbalist up in Wisconsin, I believe. And he talks about the 6 different plant categories. So astringent is one of the categories. Bitters are another category. And basically, if you learn these 6 categories, you kind of understand the 6 chemical families. So if I go to Africa and a plant is aromatic, just like at home, that means it has a benzene ring of carbons, and that it's, it has volatile oils to it, and it's generally going to be purifying, antiseptic, antibacterial. And that's why our soaps have aromatic smells to them, is because that's what they do naturally in nature. So I like to teach it that way, because it's just way more simple and less overwhelming. But over the years, I mean, Asheville has, here in this neck of the woods, we have like 6 herbal schools, so everyone's an herbalist. And so our kids kind of like, I kind of take it in just through osmosis, through hanging out with the right people. So
Asheville has a ton of plant people. It's actually kind of overwhelming. You're like, you go down there and you're like, holy crap, man! Like, how many foragers are here? It's got to be like a pain in the butt to like find a good spot for like some things, right?
Yes and no. I mean, we have a lot of national forest around here, and it's kind of like, it's kind of ends up like hunting, where it's like, oh, it's reishi season. And if you walk, like less than a half a mile from the trail, you're like, the hemlock trees are just stripped of reishi, and it's like, all right, if you want good hunting, you got to go 2 miles off the trail. And that's where people stop walking. You got to go uphill. You got to go to these places where people just don't want to go. But luckily, I think there's a pretty good ethic in our neck of the woods for really respecting the forest and taking less, and leaving a lot for other people and leaving a lot for the animals. And so it hasn't been too much, but I'm not a huge herbalist. I'll do foraging and good mushrooms down here, but generally haven't noticed it too much.
Mm.
But
it
is
was
a little intimidating.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was in Asheville in April.
That's right.
And I was and I was down there, and it does seem like you guys had like some really cool stuff, that was readily available, like invasive species that are easy, like Japanese knotweed seems to be everywhere around you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good one to forage. Also, like you were speaking of Lyme disease, Japanese knotweed does have some good uses as far as Lyme is concerned.
Yeah, for sure. I've been battling with a tiny little patch on my land for the 3 years I've been living here. I've been trying to get rid of it. It just will not go away. I'm digging it out. I do everything. So I go down there once a month and I dig out the root as best I can, and it just keeps popping back up. It's unbelievable. I've actually kind of learned to appreciate it. I hated it. And now I'm kind of like, damn, you're what's up? You're a tough bastard. It's kind of cool. It's it helps with Lyme too, which I always think of this tough bastard of a disease. It just won't let go, and I'm like, huh, it's kind of cool little doctrine of signature there.
Yeah. It was kind of funny. So we were filming a YouTube episode, and it's not out yet, but I'm hoping it's going to be in there. While we were filming, talking about Lyme and ticks and everything, actually a tick started walking across my hand.
Oh, wow.
and I was like, oh my God, that's coincidental. Yeah.
Yep.
So, what stuff do you got planned coming up? You got any cool classes, events?
I got a bow building class end of January. I have a holistic survival 101 class, which kind of talks a little bit about the emotions, but also just carving, fire, shelter, the basic human needs in the woods. That's in May, I believe. And then my 10-month immersion program, which is called Deep Remembering, that starts in March for 2024. So that'll be the 5th year I'll be running that program. So those are the main. I also have I take that back. I have one more class. I have an animal processing class. So learning how to butcher, learning how to preserve, learning, processing sinew, bone tools, kind of how to, use everything off the animal. So that's happening in April. So.
No way.
Yeah. So some of the stuff.
Well, how can people find out about that?
Yeah, just go to my website, holisticsurvivalschool.com.
And then if people did want to go back and watch your Naked and Afraid episodes, not to see your body, but to see.
Oh, come on.
They blur it out anyway. What are you looking at?
It's always the warning I give people. I was like, you can go watch the episode, but my ass will be on there. So
where can you see those? Because I didn't even know that you did an episode and you shot anything with your bow. I didn't know about the third one. I thought that you had only gone on twice.
I think it's on HBO.
Yeah, HBO's got them all on there. That's where I saw they did the Naked Afraid for Love or whatever it was. I was like, what is this?
So yeah, it looks like HBO's got them. So so I was on Naked and Afraid regular, and that was season 3, episode 1. I did the first season of Naked and Afraid XL. So that's 8 episodes or something like that. And then I did Naked and Afraid Alone, and that was episode 1 of that. So
nice.
Yeah, you can find all those.
Sweet, man. Well, I really had a blast talking to you. And if it weren't so late at night while we were recording this and I didn't have to wake up and see my family tomorrow, I might be tempted to keep talking to you.
Yeah, totally. I've been having fun. This is great.
Yep. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, and we'll have to have you on again in I don't know, next year sometime to talk about all the cool stuff that you've been up to.
I would love that. That'd be great.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
Cool. Thanks, Clay. Thanks, Luke.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.